Hey everyone, I'm Jeff Dalton. We're 1/3 of the Lunar Octet. I know that sounds weird, but there are 9 of us on our record, Convergence, and I think they picked me to start it because I'm the new guy. I've only been with the band 25 years, since 1992. But John and Steve, y'all are original guys. How long have you been in the Lunar Octet? Or its predecessor?
We started in 1653, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's a long time. The band started in a garage with sort of a very loose vision of bringing together some musicians in Ann Arbor, Michigan to have some fun. And who would have known the journey that we'd be on for nearly 40 years now?
Yeah.
Well, it was around 1983, I think, right?
Yeah.
So converged, and we moved from your basement up to your garage. I think that was our first big step.
That was a big promotion to a new gig.
Yeah.
And the reason that you all are here today, we hope, is because our new CD, after nearly 40 years, called Convergence, is out, and we are just thrilled with the reception that this music is getting after all of this time. Convergence is on Summit Records, and we're incredibly grateful to Summit for putting it out. And it's a mixture of compositions and arrangements by Steve and compositions and arrangements by conguero Aaron Kaufman, and a piece by Paul Vornhagen, who plays saxophone in the band, a piece by Dave Mason, who was the original percussionist in the band, and it's been broadcast on the radio in more than 25 countries now. It's been on more than 325 radio stations and been reviewed in lots of jazz publications, and we're just so thrilled that listeners are enjoying this music. Don't you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to thank, well, first of all, we need to thank Gail for having us on this amazing program. So thank you, Gail. I was telling her before the show that I was a little nervous because she's had so many great artists on, but we should also thank, Downbeat magazines and Jazz Is and Jazz Times have been writing some really great, really astounding. I mean, I'm just like astounded at some of the things I'm reading about the band. Not that I didn't always feel that way about the Lunar Octet, but I just didn't realize how many others felt that way about it. So I was always curious, though, this is a question for Steve, like the band started out as an experimental African rhythms, very tribal sort of sound. And then here we have with Samba Diabolico and Toot Sweet, and these almost, I think I said to you earlier, it's like Brahms meets Tito Puente meets Carlos Santana. Like, how did that happen?
Well, I think our fearless leader or the person who conceived of the band, Dan Ladizinski, we were playing for a school with special kids who maybe were on the Down syndrome spectrum, and they were dancing so beautifully because they couldn't try to imitate anybody else. They had to dance however their inner energies were allowed to flow, and it was just such a pure expression of joy in these kids dancing in front of us, and that was inspiring. And then afterwards they came up and they said, I think we've seen you on TV. They were sure they'd seen me on TV. And it turned out I looked like an actor in this sitcom called Emergency. And I had no idea. So Dan joked that I should write a tune called Sitcom Paramedic. And I did. So just that was the seed crystal that started my composing. And before that, I'd listened to a lot of classical music. I'd taken, I'd played some Brahms. I started piano late in my 20s. And I started taking some lessons in classical because I loved it so much. And I'd, been wanting to figure out how to compose, how to improvise on saxophone. And so I wanted to learn piano to better understand what I was doing on sax. And And so I was doing all this, but I was learning a bunch of jazz, like real book tunes, but it never occurred to me to compose, and so that was what started it. Just
Wow.
like a look-and remark, really.
And Steve, your pieces are so creative, so complex, that with different sections and different feels,
movements, really, yeah.
Jeff was alluding to Samba Diabolico, which is the piece that ended up on the Jazz Is on Disc record that went out to more than 10,000 subscribers of that magazine. Which it's really, as Jeff says, it's like a little symphony encapsulated in an 11-minute jazz composition. How did you transition from I'm not a composer to creating gargantuan works like that?
Well, I mean, I grew up. The music came to me, really. I didn't have to seek it out when I was a kid. I was surrounded by my parents were into classical music. WFMT in Chicago got up to us in our little town in Wisconsin, and so I was hearing that, and I was hearing folk music, and I got into jazz. My brother gave me a couple albums, the best of the modern jazz quartet, which was a real good, link to jazz because it has some classical elements in it, and then Love Supreme by John Coltrane. So that the expanse between those two is kind of where I've, been occupied, since then. And I think it was just something I absorbed. I was a sponge. I absorbed, the personalities of people around me when I was growing up, and I absorbed the music, and eventually it started coming out. A lot of it is the band chemistry in rehearsals, and that was the real joy of being asked to be in the Lunar Octet, or Lunar Glee Club as we used to call it, but was that we just created these things. We'd bring material in, but a lot of it was how the other members of the band responded to what I wrote. And I got ideas from just that came out of people as in rehearsals, and that I'd go home afterwards and think, okay, here's where it can go, and things evolved very organically like that.
I mean, the one thing we had 40 years ago when we were young is we had a lot of free time.
Yes.
Yeah. So the thing, these days, great players can't afford to get together for a rehearsal every week for months because they've got so many gigs on their calendars and so many things happening. But in those days, we were able to get together. We didn't have any deadlines. We didn't have any rush to meet some kind of performance that we had to deliver for. And, Steve, you're right that those early rehearsals were just people coming in with little sketches of maybe 8 bars of something and just playing it and saying, as a group, where could we take it? So in some sense, almost every composition, probably there should be 8 composers on it.
Right.
Yeah, even with Aaron, our conga player, Aaron's compositions are interesting because he comes in with not just a basic rhythm, but almost a melody on the congas. He's like, the melody should be something like this. And I've never seen anybody compose melodically on congas like Aaron does, because he bends the skins and he does all this really cool stuff. Right. And it's almost like I can hear that melody when you're playing just the conga part. And then, the horn players start picking it up, and then some harmonies get written, and drums and bass come in, and all of a sudden it's a new tune. And even more with Aaron's compositions, it's more very collaborative that way.
Yeah, the melodies are in his drums. Makes this, he fills the gap between the rhythm and the melody. It's all connected in his world.
Yeah.
There's a tension. He studies Afro-Cuban, especially Cuban conga playing, to be faithful to it, but his own instincts take him in fresh, different directions where you'd say, well, that doesn't sound derivative. Speaking of which, one of the things that the reviews have talked about there have been enough reviews published now that although Steve is mentioned in almost every one for his amazing compositions and playing, that each of us has been mentioned on occasion. And
Sure.
Jeff, your bass playing was called out by the great drummer Peter Erskine early on when he heard the record and said, "Wow, great bass playing." When I listen to you, you have a very unique voice on the instrument, and I wouldn't say that you sound like any bass player who I could say, "Oh yeah, he's just Jocko" or whatever. Who are the big inspirations for your playing?
Well, I almost forget about the things that I did in my youth, but I was actually born into a traveling music family. I think Partridge Family unplugged. And except we were really playing, and I played acoustic bass in that group when I was about 8 years old. And my dad was a bass player, and he encouraged me to listen to all the greats, Ray Brown, of course, and so many others. And I don't know. Then I really had an obsession with electric bass, and of course, Jaco Pastorius was big then, Stanley Clarke, and all that. So I was really absorbed into that. And then I discovered this guy out of Oakland, California, named Rocco Prestia. You may know Rocco. He was the bass player with Tower of Power for about 40 years. And I used to watch him play, and I'm like, he's like no drama, just playing the notes, but he plays all cool stuff. And he's just always there. And so I kind of changed my perspective of my influencers, not like who I tried to play like, but who I tried to have a similar vibe in terms of the way they approach the instrument. And Rocco Prestia was always a really big influence. And then there's another bass player named Leland Scalar, who's very similar, not as well known probably. And he's also just sort of there without any drama, without any crazy soloing. And I wouldn't call myself like a big bass soloist, but I try to just be there as much as I can. Really been influenced by those two gentlemen. There's so many great bass players, every one of them probably had an influence, but really growing up, my father was a huge influence as a bass player and always telling me to, lay back more and play simpler. When you're young, you're obsessed with lots of notes and blazing speed and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't actually make your phone ring, which is kind of my dad used to say the bass has two registers. There's the high register and there's the cash register. So they call that first position. So when I'm playing with the Lunar Octet, I try hard to play in the cash register as much as possible. And, every minute or two, maybe throw something interesting, more interesting in. But I'm just really into playing the groove more than anything else. So.
But you made a video once of Portrait of Tracy, I think, that was incredibly authentic. And I thought, my God, this guy is spectacular.
Well, the joke around here is I can play anything you want. I just need 2 days to work it up. So I did a recording of Donna Lee the same way. I just spent 2 days practicing it. And I went to music school, so I know how to play, the instrument. this doesn't appeal to me to play like the really complex stuff, like maybe it did when I was 20, Yeah. So it fits well with the band. The Lunars are, I really enjoy playing the music, and it's a great place to be a bass player with you as a drummer.
Well, and some of the most exciting moments for me as a drummer, honestly, are Steve, when you're soloing over tunes, because we know these compositions, and when we play the orchestrated parts, that's the predictable part. But your soloing is fresh, and one of the comments again that we get from so many reviewers is that the music makes people happy. That no matter what the grooves are, even Subway Tension, there's a tune called Subway Tension that Aaron Kaufman wrote, and it really starts off, and if you know the title of this tune, you know exactly what it's talking about. That feeling of going down the steps of Manhattan, thinking, "Am I going to survive this ride?" The way we used to think 30 years ago, and even on tunes like that, you are eventually, you just can't help but smile as a listener. In fact, I listened to the whole record yesterday, and after so many years of hearing it, Steve, you soar as a soloist, and it's really, and I remember vividly. I'm sure you remember better. You did not like that recording session. You and Paul were in a booth together, kind of sharing microphones and space, and it wasn't easy to hear, and yet your playing is just brilliant. And I think people would like to hear. You mentioned Dexter Gordon as an important influence. Where does your saxophone playing come from?
Well, it came from a rejection of classical music after I finished high school. The director that I had was he could be pretty mean to people, and so I was a good sight reader, but I just wanted to get away from the printed page. I don't know, when you get out of high school, you rebel against some things, and that's one thing I did. And so I was out in nature quite a bit. I was taking environmental classes, environmental field trips, and I took my clarinet along, and I'd improvise, out on a front porch or something. I'd be slapping mosquitoes while I was just trying to I was trying to play what was in my mind rather than what was on the page. And it was basically, I had to relearn the instrument, in order to get from one note to the next. And so that was the beginning of it. And then by chance, I met somebody who was in the 251 orchestra in Ann Arbor. And so I got into that group, David Swain and 251, and, a lot of great, players in Detroit scene. And, he's had everybody play in that band at one point or another. And that was really a special situation for me to, and you're just looking forward to every solo you get, because it's a big band and you have to share. And so it was intense. And I learned at some point I just started transcribing solos. Don Byas, there's a great solo on the Smithsonian record, and Dexter Gordon. And I actually, first time I heard Charlie Parker, in college, somebody played it for me, and I thought, well, I didn't know what to think. People say that they have this great, insight that's what they want to do with their lives, but it took me a while. I actually had to go back in time from Charlie. It was just, that was too fast for me. So I had to go back to Lester Young, basically, the great tenor player in Count Basie's band. And because it seemed simple what he was doing, but it was actually rhythmically very complex. So I wore out a lot of tape players just trying to figure out what he was doing. And then, Wardell Gray and Dexter Gordon, Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, it was just really trying to get that music inside of me, trying to figure out what all those beautiful things they were doing. And so, what comes out then is whatever has, composted inside and gone through whatever transformations.
I love the clarinet work that you do on the record. Is so beautiful on Until I Find the Words. And I think on Cruisin' it's another one where you wouldn't expect a lot of clarinet, but all of a sudden you've got, wow, that's a clarinet in there. And really, really, you hear that with Paul's clarinet too. So you've got
he's got
playing the alto clarinet on playing just a really cool low end solo. Yeah. And so it's way broader than just sax and trumpet. You've got clarinet in there, bass clarinet, and all kinds of cool instruments going on the record.
And like that alto clarinet sound is like some boa constrictor kind of going down the slowly down the subway tracks.
It's
getting
perfect. It's perfect for the song for Subway Tension. It's just like the perfect instrument. All the solos on that one. If you buy the record and you listen to it, if you only have time to listen to one tune, I would listen to the entire record. But Subway Tension's got some really interesting stuff. I love Sam Clark's guitar solo. It's almost like, I think Aaron sometimes says he's like a painter, and it is kind of like that. It's just like this wall of interesting sound. It isn't just melody. And Sam's just such an integral part of the band, between that really cool full chord sounding work that he does, and then he'll rip off a Santana quality solo at any time. You never know when he's going to do it, and pretty cool stuff. He really makes the band for me.
And what's interesting is that he is able to do his thing with Keaton Royer playing piano. And, it's so common to think about a conflict between two chordal instruments like that, but they don't. They've found a way to make it work. And Keaton's, I think, honestly, we've had some remarkable people in this band during its 40 years. And, Keaton, I think, is the latest discovery to join us. He's the youngest in the band by far. He's a kind of working guy who's graduated from the University of Michigan Music School and is on that scene. And I expect this record will be a breakout record for him because every solo he plays is just so remarkable. I mean, it's like he's just sitting back and relaxed, and yet every little line he plays is so gorgeous and so perfect and so swinging and so intense and fits so nicely. Plus, his harmonic stuff takes Steve's ideas, Aaron's ideas, and then works with Sam. It's really a treat to have him in the band.
Yeah, it's amazing that if you really dissect the music, and I've been listening, as you know, I listened to it 1,000 times when I was mixing it, and how everybody kind of plays their own style. Like, even though, like, I was remarkable on I think it's Norm's Nambo, when you and I are grooving on I don't even know exactly what the beat we're playing there is. I can't remember the name of it, but Sam's out there sounding like a Motown record. He's just playing this groove on the chords that sound like it's just right out of the Funk Brothers, and we're playing this timbale groove or something in the background, and you wouldn't think that would go together, but it's like amazing how good it sounds, and just crazy. And everybody kind of has their own take on everything, but it all seems to work, and not sure why.
Yeah, no, and I think it's because it's like 35 years of trial and error to get it just right without feeling any no models. We're not trying to be Snarky Puppy. We're not trying to be the Count Basie Orchestra. There's no model for what we do, which gives us this freedom to do it. However, Jeff, I think people would like to hear the story. There was one little encroaching, we might say, into the territory of others' music that involved the famous percussionist Airto.
Yes.
I think people might like to hear that story if you.
Well, there's one of Steve's great tunes. It starts with a bass solo, so it's a fun tune called Samba Over Easy, and for many years there was a vocal interlude in this tune. And the melody of the vocal interlude was drawn from an Airto tune called 7/4 Tombo, I think is the actual name of it.
Yep.
And none of us in the band really, I think for a while, really grasped completely where that song came from and where that melody came from, because we didn't take it right from him. It was just, sort of, I always thought it was like a Brazilian folk song kind of a melody. And so when we made the record, all of a sudden, I can't remember who it was. It might have been you, John, said, did anybody check with Airto to make sure that isn't actually, from his song? So I did that. I called Airto's people, and they said, oh, yeah, that's our song. I sent them a copy of it. And we talked to them at some length about licensing the melody for the song, because we had been doing it for 35 years that way. And in the end, we decided to not use it. We decided to write something completely new and make it a full Steve Hiltner, extravaganza. But by that point, the band had totally scattered. We were out of the studio. I was in Florida. Steve was in Princeton. You were in California. So we did the whole thing remotely. Steve sent me a recording of his sax. I added vocals. I played bass on it. John added drums, and all the guys sent me remote files, and then I was able to integrate it into the overall mix, so it was seamless. And you can't really tell that we actually recorded it with the Airto melody, and then said, no, we can't release this. It's not, it's not right. It's his composition. So you listen to the record, you don't know that, and right before we released it, a completely different melody was actually in that section. It worked out really well, and the recordings came. You can't really tell, so it really sounds cool, and it's a great melody.
Yeah, actually, and you left out the juiciest part of it, which was that after you contacted Airto's office, we learned that they had this same type of scenario happen in a much less appealing way before, where somebody taken that same melody, put it on their record. I think it was some sort of hip hop record that made a ton of money.
It was a hit in Europe. Yeah,
it was a big hit. Airto sued them for copyright violation, made a ton of money from them after the fact.
Yeah, rightfully
we said, hey, could we use your melody? He was like, yes, absolutely, for a gigantic amount of money.
Yeah, right.
We said,
he was smart by then.
Yeah.
The band that did that in Europe, they turned it into like a disco song, And it was a big hit in the the dance dance hall type of disco places. So I guess he learned his lesson by then. Great melody, really great stuff. Of course, his is in 7/4 and ours is in 4/4.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit different. Yeah.
So I see in the chat here that we've been asked to give people a little bit of a better feel for the band. So I'll tell you that we are like a little big band is the way I feel about it. That Brandon Cooper plays trumpet on the front line with Steve. Actually, Brandon plays flugelhorn as well as trumpet. Steve plays alto saxophone and clarinet. Paul Vornhagen, who is kind of the marquee star of the band in terms of his own award-winning accomplishments as a jazz artist, plays tenor saxophone and flute and alto clarinet. We've mentioned Sam Clark on guitar. We've mentioned Keaton Royer on piano. Jeff is the amazing bassist. I play drums. Aaron Kaufman plays
amazingly,
and Olman Piedra is the ninth guy who plays percussion. And he really, for my ear, he brings such an important sparkle to this band. In fact, we are currently number 2 on the Amazon Latin Jazz top releases. And we were number 1 a week ago. And I think it's really importantly due not only to the brilliant compositions and the creative approaches to the Latin idiom that the composers brought to us, but it's also just Olman's spark. He's a professor of percussion at the University of Toledo, and he's really accomplished in that arena and is just a great player. And we're heartbroken that he's going to be in his home of Costa Rica next month instead of in Ann Arbor with us playing. But he'll be back for other gigs.
It's an amazing sight to see the band because of the array of instrumentation that's on the stage. I mean, each sax player plays multiple doubles and triples. Brandon's playing flugelhorn and trumpet. I'm playing upright and electric. Kunga's he's got all kinds of stuff. Of course, Olman's got his stuff. It's just like it's a crazy assortment of instruments and musical joy on that stage that you really can't miss. It's listen to the record, you'll hear it all. It's all in there. It's fantastic stuff.
I see in the chat as well that we got a question about our association with the University of Michigan. The reason we came together as a band because of the University of Michigan. It brought many of us to town, even though Steve was there. It brought us to Steve, basically. Those of us who were out of town. Steve was already living there, and I think almost all of us either got a degree at Michigan or worked at the University of Michigan. And so that it's a very strong association. In fact, when the record first came out, I sent a note to the University of Michigan Alumni Association saying, "Hey, in case you're interested, there's a band down the street from you in Ann Arbor that we're having some fun and getting some visibility." And I haven't heard from them yet. So I think there's so many successes that the University of Michigan has that we're just another drop.
We've done a lot of gigs over there over the years too.
Yes, we have.
Union and.
A friend of mine was saying that one of his favorite aspects of our website, lunaroctet.com, is the historic pictures that we have going way back to the beginning of the band, where they're all black and white, and we're on a stage in front of the Michigan Union, or we're playing at the Ann Arbor Art Fair, and we all look quite a bit younger 40 years ago than we do now.
No doubt about that. This is our second album, though, right? So Highway Fun was back in the 80s, and now Convergence is a completely different kind of record, and it's a record you can get anywhere. I see it on Spotify, on iTunes, on Amazon, on the local record stores, and I'm surprised to see who has it that I don't know. I was like, "Hey, I have your album." Wow, that's way cool that you're buying the album. So definitely want to check that out.
And, we were amazed last weekend, I guess, one of the major radio stations in Miami played the entire record from start to finish. It's one thing. I mean, one of the things that's cool about it is that not only are we getting a lot of airplay, but it's not like there are 2 songs that people like and they keep getting played over and over again. Almost everything on the record has gotten about equal airplay to everything else. And then when they play the whole record, we're like, oh, okay. We did kind of have a vision here of like it would fit together and it would be a story and it would go from the beginning to the end. And somebody's actually willing to tell the whole story on the radio. That's great.
Very cool. So we're we are starting to now that COVID's sort of coming to a close, we hope, although it's hard to say now. looking to play more festival gigs, more big club gigs. Of course, with 9 guys and 800 pieces of equipment, there's a limited stage size for us. But once COVID's over, we're going to be out there doing festivals and doing bigger clubs and playing as much as we can, because we really have something fantastic here.
Yeah. And we, in our closing 30 seconds, we'll thank Gail for having us on.
Yes.
This is such an important forum for so many people in jazz. We're just honored and grateful to be a part of Gail's offerings, and grateful to Gail for everything she's doing to keep this music alive. She's got the best tagline I've ever seen in jazz to promote the idea of your daily dose of jazz is necessary. And so if you don't know that, I'm not going to say it. You'll check it out when you look at her website and watch these videos. But Gail, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, listeners. And we hope to see you on the bandstand.
Have a great night, everybody.